All right, right on time, and a very good morning to all those that have just come in nice and early, right on time. I really appreciate how everybody has, got into the habit of getting onto these things very early. So thank you very much. If you've been in a few of these with me, you know some kind of rules that I have around webinars. So do say hello, as Johanna Pretorius has already started. Say hello in the chat. You will use it when we get to the Q&A section. So say hello. Perhaps tell us where you are. Tell us what city you are in. I'm currently in Pretoria. I'd love to get a sense of where our various registrants that have come onto this call are. So as you come in, say hello, tell us where you are. I know and I appreciate a lot of us are far and wide. I mean, we've got people coming in from Nairobi in Kenya. It's fantastic to see Petrus in Bloemfontein. Good morning, great to see all you guys. And we've got a very, very good, exciting webinar lined up for you this morning. So as you come in, please tell us how you're doing and what city you are in. Gonna give it a few more minutes just to let other people as well come in. But thank you to Para, thank you to everybody else that's come in very early today. Good morning. And as you come in, as I said, please do say hello. Continue to say hello in the chat and tell us where you are. Well, so today's webinar is entitled The Magic of Financial Storytelling, How Finance Leaders Can Turn Data into Compelling Narratives. And if that's the one that you are hoping to get to, then you're definitely in the right place. I've got some really esteemed guests with me that will take us through the story today. So really looking forward to spending the next 57 minutes with you. So financial leadership role has shifted significantly in response to the ongoing disruption caused by COVID-19. Increasingly, businesses are looking to finance leaders to steer them through the market change, uncertainty, and unpredictability. To do this and empower remote and hybrid teams, finance leaders need accurate, relevant, and reliable insights that highlight the opportunity and to mitigate any potential risk. So in this webinar, you will hear from Jordaan Burger, who's the Vice President of Finance at Sage Africa, Middle East, and you also, as well as Asia, if I may add. You also hear from Nobukhosi Dlamini. She's an award-winning techpreneur. And we also have Chuma Mjali. She's an academic. She's a Deputy Dean of Department of, and a lecturer at the University of Fort Hare. And we've got a surprise guest for you. We didn't tell you, but sometimes we do these kind of things. We've got Grant Boer, who's a product specialist. He's got something to demonstrate for us as well as we get towards the end of this session today. So all the, my esteemed guests will explore the trends, share their experiences, perhaps give you some tips and tricks, and reveal insights from Sage recent research that they've done in their business. So that's where we are. That's how we stood up. Hopefully around about 5 past to try and get this ship on the road. And then we'll start off perhaps just to give you some insights. We'll have a panel discussion for about half an hour or so. Myself, Jordaan, Nobukhosi, and Chuma we'll chat about this thing called financial storytelling and what the magic that it offers. And then feel free to answer to post your questions in the chat at any time. It's not every day that we get an opportunity to have these top level leaders in industry on a panel. So if you have a question, post it in the chat, even though we do have a Q&A section towards the end of the session today. So, but I encourage you to, if you have a question that's pressing, that comes up at any moment, please feel free to post it in the chat. So around about 12 o'clock, we intend to obviously close off our session, and that's it. And I wish you all a fantastic session coming up. And to just perhaps kick us off our session, I'm going to call upon the ladies first. Perhaps I'll start with Chuma Mjali, who's the academic on here, to perhaps tell us a little bit about yourself as you welcome and introduce the session. Chuma.
Thank you for that, Brian, for that lovely introduction. and welcome to all the guests on this call. We hope you find it very informative. Quick story about myself. Was not always an academic, but came into academia, involved mostly in the initial professional development spaces. So looking at future finance leaders, curriculums, and what attributes they should be having. So the idea that, does it still make sense for future finance leaders to focus on numbers, or is there more that needs to be considered and looked at? But that's me in a nutshell.
Thank you for that, Chuma. I'll go over to our tech entrepreneur and our resident entrepreneur, Nobukhosi Dlamini. Good morning, how are you doing?
I'm great, Brian, how are you doing?
All right, thank you. So
right.
People want to know a little bit about you.
Okay, so my background is in corporate IT. I've worked in many IT environments, leading IT implementations. I've worked as an ERP manager, partnering with the finance leaders in organizations. And now I run a cybersecurity company called Biotic Tech, and I am focused on helping organizations to secure their environments.
All right, and organizations love that kind of work, secure their finance, right? I love that term. Before I go to Jordaan, I want to go to our surprise guest, Mr. Grant Paul. Grant, how are you doing?
Good morning, very well. Brian, thank you very much for the introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Grant Paul. I am from the pre-sales team here at Sage in Johannesburg, and my speciality is Sage Intacct. So I'll be doing the presentation for you today.
Awesome. Thank you. Last but not least, Jordaan, always good to see you. How are you doing this morning?
Hi, Brian. I'm doing very well, thank you, and thanks a lot for inviting me. I want to say hello to all of our guests. I'm also in a very sunny Pretoria today, enjoying the hot weather. I'm the Vice President of Finance for Sage in Africa, Middle East, and Asia Pacific. I've been with the company for 2.5 years now. And the topic of today is really, really close to my heart. I think financial storytelling is probably one of the most important responsibilities we have, especially as one moves up in the ladder of the finance world. So very excited to join you today on this interesting topic.
Awesome, thanks for that, Jordaan. So you put that word that I would like some clarity on, and I'm sure some of my guests might. But so. And there's that storytelling, and I want to go to the academic and start there. And what is this storytelling?
I think, Brian, when people talk of storytelling, it's something that's very fond to us. I think in the African culture, we speak of the ability to relay stories in a meaningful way. And I think very much in this context, it's the finance leader does not only need to understand the numbers of their business, so i.e. there's been a change of this profit from X to Y, but they need to be able to tell a fuller and richer story, i.e. being able to look at more granular data and come up with insightful, I think, commentary and therefore decisions that can be made in a business. So the idea of using this data to be able not to just spot increases, but to tell a more meaningful story of what your business means. So i.e. if I change X, it's going to have an impact of profit of Y, and be able to do so, I think, in real time. So in short, I think that's what we speak of when we talk about this financial storytelling aspect.
All right, thank you. I'll go to Jordaan quickly, and just to kind of stay on the financial storytelling. See, we call this webinar the magic of financial storytelling. Is this something that at Sage you relate to on a day-to-day basis? That's something that you're intentional about?
Absolutely, Brian. And it's actually before Sage that I first heard about financial storytelling. So a quick personal story. I was doing a management development program course at Henley, and one of the presenters cornered me offline during one of our breaks. And she asked me, "What do you do?" And I told her, my job title and what I do for the company. And she said, no, I want to know what it is that you do. And I explained what we do as finance professionals and in a CFO or an FD role. And she said, no, I don't want to know that. I want to know what is your biggest responsibility. And I then once again went into the practicalities of the day-to-day job. And she said, no, your responsibility is to tell the story of the numbers. And that hit really, really hard. She was a managing director, I think, for the Land Bank a while back. And she said that's what she expects of a CFO or a financial leader, is for them to tell the story of the numbers so that they know what actions they need to take into the business. And that's why I'm saying I feel so passionate about this. It's something I think we really, really need to focus on very well. And depending on how well you've got that ability to tell the story of the numbers, the more you can play that role of being a strategic ally within the business.
Yeah, I love that. I love, story, you got to read through the fluff and be really practical on what it is. And when we talk about being practical, there's no better person than an entrepreneur who knows, the day-to-day mechanics of being proactive. Nobukhosi, storytelling as a tech entrepreneur, what does it mean for you?
So, Brian, I love what Jordaan has said about us being able to tell the story of the numbers. And in order to build that narrative around financial performance, what we as technical people need to bring to the table is that in-depth financial data, presenting those advanced reporting tools and so on. And that's really the enabler to everything, is the practicality, as you've said, because finance leaders want to know the story. They want to understand what's going on where. And as Chuma has been saying, if you change X, what happens? And for that to happen, you need to have that baseline of technology, which enables everything. And I suppose that's why we're here, to be able to talk about these tools that are now allowing everybody, including like small and medium organizations, to have access to those features and capabilities in order to be able to tell their stories.
So it's interesting, you actually mentioned the word baseline, and for me, when I hear this, I'm talking about really the beginning. Where's the start? And I'm going to go back to Chuma quickly. And when we spoke earlier, you mentioned something about changes in curricula that will help us kind of tell that story. Can you want to share, how that is important? You coming from the world of academia.
Thank you for that, Brian. I think as the panelists, Jordaan and Nobukhosi, were speaking, again, it was being re-emphasized that the future finance leaders need to not only understand the numbers, but be able to tell a story about the numbers. So it's not enough to just churn out these numbers, but they need to understand. And I think professionally, some of the professional bodies have started to also appreciate this, and curriculums have now started to change and shift. In fact, the future of a chartered accountant in 2025 and the skills they will possess will be very, very different. And we see that the shift has moved towards the storytelling, where the emphasis is on the data plus the digitally empowered aspect. So to use the two together to come up with meaningful insights and to focus more on strategy. So the curriculums have also appreciated that the future is moving towards a point where storytelling is becoming important, and that the future finance leaders of today need to be trained today, so that by the time they hit 2025 or the future, they're able to deal and are able to tell these stories that will be required of them in the market.
So, I'm going to stay with you just for the next part as well, Chuma. And you mentioned that the bodies are looking for, I think when you mentioned SAICA when you earlier spoke. So, what are they specifically looking for? What are some of the changes that are being done from the academic perspective to get our people ready for this sort of transformation journey?
Thank you for that again. I think simply put is that I think the CA that would come out today would not have as much of a digitally focused aspect. So they wouldn't be able to tell the story as well using the appropriate tools. So one of the significant shifts that we've seen in what is called that CA 2025 curriculum aspect is a whole new, I want to say, acumen being added there. So there's a whole new digital acumen that didn't exist before that's been added to say, well, we need to make sure that these aspects and these attributes can be said to be possessed by future CAs. And I think it was also in response to the automation and the AI, where I think the accountants were being told that basically most of the roles are repeatable, and that we could find ourselves in situations where some of the finance leaders, in terms of crunching numbers, might become irrelevant. And therefore, we need to understand how to strategically now be able to tell the story. So look at the numbers, analyze the numbers, be able to dissect and come up with meaningful insights around what these numbers mean, which is basically back to the storytelling.
Yeah, it's very interesting, and I think that leads kind of nicely to Jordaan. Jordaan is in the working of every day as a finance leader. Jordaan, what are some of the changes that you've seen, and perhaps you mentioned something actually interesting to me. You said, how do you interpret that data? Because you've kind of moving in stages all the time. Perhaps you can tell us a bit more.
Right, so obviously the data that we're working with today is an awful lot more than what we used to, right? If you just think about your mobile phone and the amount of storage that you need on there for everything that you access day to day, comparing that to 3 or 4 years ago, it's ballooned quite drastically. So back to the storytelling, we tell the story to take an action. And if I think about my study days, I'm not going to say how many years back that was to give away my age, but we already had the data digitized, right? Because we had things like pastel accounting and Excel and all of that as part of our curriculum. So the digitization of the data has been around for an extremely long period of time. The focus then shifted to building those analytical skills, right? So for us to have the ability to take that digitized data, make the analysis, and then try and see some pictures from there. And then where it's moving to now is the automation and the systemization of that analytical capability. Rather than us trying to figure out what the data says, we've got tools and systems these days that can help us automate the analytics. It's going to be more about what we do with that, how we interpret it, and how we apply that to action. And I'm hoping later from what Grant is going to show us, it's there. We've got the automation, we've got the tools within businesses, within systems, within cloud applications to actually do the difficult work of the analysis for us. It's what we do with that data and what actions we drive from that.
Thanks, Jordaan. Nobukhosi, we're hearing a really good story here, but often people say, well, you're hearing it from big business, you're hearing it from Sage. Tell me from an SME perspective, what are you looking for? What is this transformation? What are perhaps even some of the challenges, and what do they need to do?
Well, as an SMME, you want to be able to move quickly, to understand your story very well so that you can make quick decisions and be able to do it in a way that's affordable. Those are some of the challenges that small and medium organizations face. It's always about how much do I need to invest in this technology or in this new way of working. And the benefit really that we're seeing is that cloud providers are now able to save SMMEs money because they purchase computing resources. So the enablers to be able to use this data at massive quantities and lower costs, so that as a small company or as a medium-sized company, we can utilize those pooled resources without having to invest the upfront capex to be able to go into the sphere. So we don't need to purchase our own expensive infrastructure. We don't need to hire highly skilled people upfront because some of these skills are very expensive. If we're talking about digital, there's a huge demand for these kind of people in the market. You're talking about analytical people, data scientists, security people. Those are people that a lot of small organizations can't afford. And by leveraging what cloud providers are able to put together, we're able to then share in those pooled resources to be able to, as small and medium organizations, compete in that space, which is great, because the barriers to entry are lowered, and we're able to play in that space as well.
Yeah, improved economies of scale, and it's some very good points, because I'll come back to you. I wanted to touch a little bit more on these small to medium businesses. I want to go to Jordaan quickly. Jordaan, you mentioned, Nobukhosi spoke about this cloud technology and how it is sort of helping CFOs tell the story, but there's some myths sometimes that are attached to this. Can you set us on our right path? What is this thing? Why do we need to embrace it, and why is it important?
There are so many things, and I can keep you busy for a long period of time here, Brian. I think COVID accelerated this whole transition to the cloud, right? It started off with basic things like accessing our data from anywhere during lockdowns, not having to worry about backups, not having to worry about where we find ourselves when we need to do something on one of our systems. But the other benefits have been there all along as well. Security benefits, I think Nobukhosi can tell you an awful lot about that. In a previous conversation of ours, I on purpose asked her whether she thinks each and every business needs a security team. And she obviously responded, because she's got the knowledge of the business, is that you can't afford that. But what your cloud providers do for you is they take away that burden for you to worry about things like security, because of things like it most of the time being a single source code, because of the fact that patches and all of that is being distributed to all of the customers at the same time. So there's just so many benefits to this cloud thing. The research that we are seeing is that cloud is here to stay. COVID potentially as well. It just depends in what form, but that's also very unpredictable on where that's going. But COVID probably here to stay. Cloud is here to stay. The drive to automation, towards AI, all of that is here to stay with us. If you think about the fact that we're now going back to hybrid working environments, this managing of remote work teams is going to stay with us as well. So in this whole cloud ecosystem, I think there are so many benefits for businesses to unlock, that if you're not going to jump on this bandwagon, very soon you are going to become or to find yourself in a position where you're going to struggle to keep up with your competitors. The data-driven insights for me and for the finance leaders and the commercial finance people within organizations is going to become so critical, not just to support the responsibilities of the finance team, but that of the entire business to actually make the right decisions. A last comment to illustrate that is, I had a call with my team earlier this week, and we had to illustrate to someone on a group level to tell them that we're busy with a rolling forecast exercise, but it's not the finance team's rolling forecast, it's the business. And we need to engage with all of the business stakeholders, the marketing team, the people team, the operational and sales team, to put all of that together. And cloud technology is what enables that for us to integrate a lot easier with other systems and to make sure that we stay close to the business once again to drive the correct actions.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think it's really crisp, and we've busted a few myths just in hearing that story. But you touched on, you're speaking about your finance teams and telling them that this is the, the business's sort of financial data. I want to go to Chuma quickly. Chuma, just from a, if I can call it from a digital empowerment perspective, right? You're also a CA, by the way, and so can you tell us a bit more, like, how is this giving you more digital authority? The more you get more advanced, and keeping yourself abreast with these, some of these technologies, and I suppose this mindset that Jordaan is talking about.
Thank you. I think that is a very important aspect of it. And I think I want to pick up on the key word that's been echoed, I think, by yourself and Jordaan, meaning that mindset. So I think we in our professions, we often speak of continuous development and growth and keeping up to date, in order to remain relevant. I think we all understand that that's a very big part of the profession and keeping abreast with activities. But to come back into that mindset, I think the shift has been so great that the professions have almost understood that to make a mindset shift, you need to do it earlier on in the value chain. Hence now getting universities to also think about these cloud-based softwares and to start speaking to students and teaching actually some of these cloud-based softwares already at university level. Now, I don't think there's a greater mindset shift that says we are moving into the space and it's here to stay more than some of the changes that I think we've seen professionally.
Yeah, Nobukhosi, I want to come to you on a story that you touched on earlier. Thanks for that, Chuma. And you spoke about the expense, and I think a lot of small businesses kind of stay away from adapting cloud technology, right? What can you tell them? What can you recommend to them? That's perhaps the first part of the question, and then maybe you can touch on. There's always doubt on the security elements, and you've been on this journey. What would you say?
I think cost is a huge driver for any business, but especially for small and medium businesses. And what we see with the cloud is that the cost of firstly acquiring the service or the technology is much lower, because the technology itself, the software as well as the hardware, is a pooled resource, it's a shared resource. So signing up to that kind of service is much cheaper than acquiring it for yourself. And I've mentioned about not having to pay like salaries for expert staff. There's also the cost of your energy consumption. Having your own data center in your own office, that increases your energy consumption, and surprisingly, migrating to the cloud will reduce that energy consumption. There are fewer time delays with whether it's upgrades or implementations, because usually it's just a sign-up process. But what I think I can also recommend to small and medium businesses is that the scalability and the flexibility around these technologies is so incredible. So you can scale up if your business grows, but also there's the ability to scale down, right? So sometimes organizations are scared that if I invest so much time and money into this thing, and then I see down the line that I need less, and I've already made the upfront commitment. With cloud technology, you manage your consumption. You can actually plan how much resources you want to consume. For example, if you're running a large job, let's say you have a huge workload once a week where you're processing things, running reports and so on, you can be able to ramp up your consumption of those resources over that period of time only, and then let them go and free them up later on. So it means that you don't have to invest in a lot of computing power upfront, that is just sitting there for maybe once a week or once a month utilization. But going into security, this is a huge issue. I think with COVID, one of the things that has happened, we've seen like a huge increase in cybercrime. And a lot of organizations, some of our really respectable organizations, even in this country, suffering data leaks and cyber attacks and so on. And it's practically impossible for small organizations to have the kind of security skills that they would need to protect their organizations upfront. And the funny thing is, small organizations are not immune to cyber attacks. Sometimes these criminals target small organizations because they know that they don't have the necessary skills and resources to protect themselves. And alongside, as I mentioned, with the infrastructure investment, cloud providers also invest in the skill sets and people, so that as a small organization, you're able to then just share in everything that they've put in place on a subscription basis, so that you don't need to be the one investing upfront in all this in all this technology and human resources for you to be able to compete, as it were, in this space.
So you're basically saying it's a balance between insourcing, outsourcing. You know, you have to make that decision. Do you need guidance to make that decision, or you just look at your own business? You know, what would you say? Or it's a guaranteed outsource cloud tech?
The first thing that obviously you need to do, each organization is different, is to first understand the nature of the organization and understand what field you're playing in. Some things make sense to insource, as you would say. Some things make sense to outsource, but it's always good to do that due diligence and be able to understand, so that you can also defend the decisions that you've made upfront. And as I said, the great thing about cloud technologies and sharing in pooled resources is that you don't need that upfront capex to invest into technology. A lot of organizations are scared to buy software licenses, for example, because let's be honest, these things are very expensive, you know, and maintaining your own infrastructure in your office nowadays, for me, it doesn't make sense, because we're all sitting at home. Nobody's in the office, we're all working virtually. So why are we maintaining a data center, maintaining servers in the office, when we could be using, at a fraction of the cost, something that somebody else has put together that we can leverage. So it does, obviously there's always that due diligence that each organization needs to do, but at the end of the day, it's good to also look at what the providers are putting in place and maybe speak to them and find out, for your unique use case, there might be already an existing use case that reflects what you need. So before you assume that they can't do what you need, perhaps speak to them.
Yeah, I like that. And I'm going to go to Chuma quickly. Chuma, before I actually ask the question, I just want to encourage our audience. If you have any questions at any time, I can see that Para Naidu posted a very interesting question. You may have already, Chuma, touched on it, but I'll read it out. And to the audience, if you have any questions, please post them in the chat. We'll pull up the questions from there. But Chuma, I'm going to ask you, Para Naidu's question. She's, speaking about what is it to be digitally empowered, and I know you touched on this, but I suppose the second part of the question was, how can you, ensure that senior accountants can retrain senior accountants rather to achieve this kind of digital empowerment?
Thank you for that. So I think at the beginning, the thread of the conversation focused on storytelling, but the storytelling has a base of data, and you need this data plus the correct tools. And I think the tools part now is speaking more to being digitally empowered. So yes, you can have all this data, but if you don't actually have the correct tools, then you are not going to be as empowered as much as you would want to be in order to come up with some of these insightful, I think, decisions that we've said the future finance leaders need to be considering in order to be able to tell the story. So I think quite easily being digitally empowered means that you have the appropriate tools for your business. I think Nobukhosi spent a lot of time there talking about the due diligence that each business needs to consider before looking at whatever offering they're going to invest in. But it's to have these appropriate tools and being able to tell or make quick decisions using real-time data in order, to inform your board and your CFO if something happens and you don't have to have access to this information. It becomes a bit tricky for survival of the business. So real time, so I think 3 words there for me is the right tools and being able to access this information on a real-time basis to be able to tell the story very well. So I think that's what it would mean to be digitally empowered in this era. And then there was a second aspect, I think, to the skills development. I smile and laugh because I think when the new curriculums were also introduced, and some of the academics were asked to now go and talk about some of these things, it was the exact same question to say, well, wait a minute, we now actually need to go through our own transformation. as a profession to say, well, we then need to ourselves first go and empower ourselves to go and obtain some of these skills. So it's a change management process, but you do need to get the staff to be empowered in order to be able to tell that story. And it does mean that some of the staff needs to go and reinvent and rethink some of their roles in their businesses.
Yeah, thanks for that. I hope that answers Paranaidu's very good question. Thank you. I see a few points have been thrown in the chat, but Jordaan, before I go to Grant, I want to go to Grant, but I wanted us to speak on, you know, what the two ladies have spoken about. They spoke about tools quite extensively. So to you, I mean, why is cloud tech worth its hype, right? And what is this, you know, the role of this cloud finance? And I know Grant will demonstrate something, but perhaps you could lay it out for us up front.
Brian, I think one of the shifts that happened, if you look at historical systems, we had developers of ERP platforms that tried to do everything for a single business. This whole cloud arena that we're going into is a lot more focused on best of breed for each and every separate application. So if you think about something like Sage Intacct, which is an ERP system, it's there as a cloud provider to form the foundation of the finance function and the ERP side of things. But it's also very good at integrating with other best of breed CRMs, as an example. It's not trying to be a CRM system at the same time. It's about that whole cloud ecosystem. So leveraging that ecosystem with more operational systems, sales-focused systems, if you're a retailer with things like your point of sale, etc., that's what's setting the cloud world, I think, apart from traditional offerings that were out there.
Okay, let's put it to the test. Let's see what this thing that Grant is going to say us, and see if it ticks all the boxes. Grant, you know, how are you feeling about this? You know, get a couple of minutes to show us. You know, Jordaan already alluded to it. Sage Intacct. Let's have a look. I'm sure I won't preempt any questions or answers, but the audience can have a sort of a look for themselves. You can take it away, Grant.
Wonderful. Thanks, Brian. All righty, let me share my screen. I'm going to take myself off video. Let's take the video off. Let's share my screen. Let me know when you can see the screen. All right.
You can see me for now.
The way.
That's acceptable.
All right. Okay. So there we go. Do you see the Sage developer screen?
Got it. Can see it.
You can see it. Okay,
Yeah.
Wonderful. Let me kick off. All right. So we're starting here, ladies and gentlemen, because it's very important to mention the fact that Sage Intacct is open for integration with other systems. What this means is that those systems, those niche, those bespoke systems that you're currently using today and need to continue using, we can integrate those with Sage Intacct with the use of what we call web service APIs. So for example, if you have a billing engine, all right, that you need to continue using. So for example, it's a utility billing engine, and you need those billings or those invoices to integrate back to Intacct, so that Intacct can actually send those invoices out. Well, Sage has already spent a lot of time creating those APIs for you that you can simply go ahead and use. So developer.intacct.com, you have access to this web page. If we just go have a look at accounts receivable, for example, let's go to invoices, and we'll see that there's create invoice. Now down the right-hand side there is the web service API that will be responsible for retrieving the billing information from your billing engine and integrating it with Sage Intacct. So a lot of work has been already done. This allows Intacct to be very quickly integrated with your current niche or bespoke systems. Now, marketplace.intacct.com is another web page that you have access to. And down the left-hand side is a host of software categories. I'm going to focus on CRM. And what we can see here is that Sage Intacct has already been connected to Salesforce, Sage's own CRM. If we scroll down a little bit further, you might see some familiar faces. If we just keep going down, we'll get to see that Microsoft Dynamics CRM is also integrated. So to put you at ease, Sage Intacct can have those integrations, or we can have those integrations built very, very quickly, or we simply adopt the APIs that have already been developed, and we can use those APIs to integrate Sage Intacct with your current systems. Now we're looking at Sage Intacct right now. This is the landing page of Sage Intacct. On the top there, you'll see there's a web address. I'm using Chrome as my browser. We can use any browser. So Safari, Firefox, Internet Explorer, Chrome, Windows Edge, any of those web pages, which means they can run on any device as well. So device agnostic, browser agnostic. What we just need is an internet connection and a web browser on that device, and then we'll be able to connect to Sage Intacct from anywhere in the world over the World Wide Web, the same way you do if you're connecting to your online bank. You're simply going to click on the favorite bar on your Chrome browser, log in, and you start working. And that's the same we're going to be doing on Sage Intacct. So we're working over the World Wide Web. Now, what we can also see here on our landing page is the release notes for the upcoming release. So each quarter, so every 3 months, Sage Intacct is pushing new features, new functions, bug fixes through to your instance of Sage Intacct, and it's doing that automatically. And that's one of the benefits of having a public cloud or a cloud native system, is that those updates are being pushed automatically, so that you don't have to have internal resources or people are in the ecosystem implementing those software upgrades for you. And if we scroll down a little bit further, we can see the release notes for the previous releases going backwards in time. Also, being a web native product or cloud native product, we've got online help. So the online help is now being maintained on the World Wide Web. So you don't need to be printing reams and reams of papers for training manuals. And I mean, those get outdated so quickly. You know, they're sitting in the office in cupboards. Nobody ever uses them. So we use the World Wide Web. We store our online help on the World Wide Web. And this means that as those new features and functions are being pushed through to your instance, the online help is readily available for you to learn. And you'll see in the Learning Center, there's learning videos. The Help Center has got all the user guides that you need to, operate Sage Intacct. It's also multi-company. So my user, I'm the super user, so I've got access to all of the companies. Now, if I just go back to the tab screen and I click on a company, you'll see it opens up a new tab, and now I'm logged into that new company. So there's the company over there. So for those users who work in a multi-company environment where you might be in a group situation, perhaps shared services or group services, you have the ability to very quickly switch between companies without having to log out and log in, because now you're operating in one database, one single instance where all the companies are in that database. And the fact that all the companies are in the database, it means we can trade into company with these companies now as well, simply by setting them up as customers and suppliers. So purchase orders, sales orders, invoices, all of this happens in the single database now. And this means that Sage Intacct is keeping the trial balances in balance automatically for each of the companies that are involved in the intercompany transaction. Now, it's also role-based, so I've logged in as a super user, and if we have a look down the list over here, these are all of the modules that are shipped with Sage Intacct or provisioned by Sage Intacct. So you would subscribe to a module, and then the module's provisioned to you. Now, I have access to all the companies, all the modules, but if we compare this to a user such as Nikki, we can see that Nikki only has access to one company, and Nikki, if we have a look at her procurement module, she can only do requisitions. Compared to Grant can do in the procurement module, Grant can do requisitions, orders, invoices, returns, and so on. So we have the ability to lock down a user's ability to navigate through the system very, very granularly. One of the big differences you'll see with Sage Intacct to your current systems is that Sage Intacct has what we call a dimensional ledger. So if we just go to the report section, we can see some of the examples of dimensions that I've got in my demo database where, we can post transactions to projects, to suppliers, to warehouse, to departments, cost centers, regions, supplier types, customer types, whatever it is that however you want to analyze your financial data, we're going to create a dimension for that. And we're going to post the transaction to the GL account and the dimension, because now with the dimensional ledger, the subsection or the sub account or whatever you're calling it today, we call it a dimension, is now separated from the actual account. So when you migrate to Sage Intacct, you'll end up with a very lean chart of accounts, because no longer do you need 100 fuel expense accounts for every division and cost center that you've got in your organization. We simply have one fuel expense account, and we post that cost center or that division, whatever it is, dimension against that transaction. Now, when we report out of the system, we've got multiple report writers. So you can see we've got a graphical report writer, so we can graphically represent our financial data, create our financial reports, income statements, balance sheets, trial balances, cash flow statements, comparing month on month, quarter on quarter, year on year, whatever it might be. And then two different operational report writers that provide different report writing capabilities. Now, when we actually run these reports, let's go have a look what happens over here. So I'm going to go to the reports. Let's open up one of these reports over here. And I'm going to type in something, statement of revenue expenses comparison. Now, the first thing you can see is the different ways that we can output the report. Sorry, let me go one back here. We can store it in a folder on a server somewhere. We can push it out to an HTML web page. We can store the report as a CSV file, so it automatically creates a CSV file for us. We can convert it to a PDF, push it directly through to Excel, or we can schedule it. So in other words, we're asking Sage Intacct to automatically run this report and email it to a list of recipients so that they can get that report in their inbox, perhaps ready for a Monday morning meeting at 8 o'clock. You know, they might not get to the office in time to run the reports, but at least they'll have them in their inbox and they can analyze those reports during their meetings. So let's push this particular report that we're going to look at over here out to a web page. And let's just go back there. I'm going to go click on HTML. Let's just push this one out. Just a balance sheet. Let's push this out there. Now you can see there's the department, there's the location. Now these are dimensions. So now we have the ability to filter our reports based on those dimensions and get a department balance sheet or a department expense sheet or a department income sheet by location. It could be by region, by project, you name it. Those are now dimensions that you're going to be creating. But how do we post to these dimensions? Well, let's go have a look at a purchasing transaction. Let's open up a purchase order. Let's go have a look at order number 64. And what we'll see here, if we just scroll down to the lines, is that we're posting, or we're buying software and licenses. We could post it to a project dimension. We could post it to a task dimension against that project. We can post it to an entity, so Intacct calls that a location, and then there's the department. So we're posting the transaction to the dimensions. Now, if we have a look at spend insights, what we're looking at over here is the actual budget itself. We can drill into the budget for the combination of this expense account and those dimensions. So now we define our budgets for the account plus all the dimensions. And when that account and those dimensions exist in a transaction, that's the budget that we'll use. So if we drill into that budget, so wherever you see blue text, this means we have the ability to drill down further. So let's drill down in that particular budget over there. We can see for this account, the software and licenses, and in combination with the projects department, this specific customer within this entity, that supplier, this project, this task, we can see how granular we can get with our postings. Between this date range, this is the applicable budget. Now, Sage Intacct has some rules for budgets. So depending on whether we're going to go over budget, what should the system do? Should it prevent the user from creating the transaction, or should it route it through to a supervisor to approve? And perhaps there's a delegation of authority that kicks in, where there's one or multiple approvers that get to, approve that entry. So all of those reports we can actually add to our dashboards. Now you can see there's different types of dashboards we can create. If I go to a role-based dashboard and we go down to a project manager. So if you're in a project-centric organization where all you do is projects, Sage Intacct has got a built-in project module that can help you out with those. Now, what we can see inside of here is, again, blue text. So, where we see the blue text, it means we can drill down further, just like we saw previously. But also, we can use color coding to highlight the different degrees of, whether it's good or it's bad. So here we got 0 is a very light green and 100 is a very dark green. If it's adverse, so we're going over budget. The pinks are like 1% over budget, and then the dark reds are 100. And the nice thing with that is that, especially when you're managing by exception, your eye's drawn to those reds so that you can very quickly pick out those exceptions, and interrogate them as well. So scrolling down a little bit further, what we can see on these dashboards is that if you are an approver, so perhaps of expense reports or timesheets or whatever they might be, we can put those on your dashboard as well, just to let you know that, those are the transactions that you need to approve. Now, if you're in a non-profit organization, you're probably less concerned with profitability and cost centers and more focusing on funders and funds and projects and grants and perhaps fund restrictions. So we can create a dimension for different types of fund restrictions. So permanently restricted, temporarily unrestricted, or board designated. And then what happens is when we start running our reports as well, we can just open up our reports, but perhaps we've added them to our favorites, so we don't need to navigate through the whole list of reports anymore. We just add them to our favorites, and then using the filter criteria, we can just type in a couple of words, and there's our report, statement of activities. Now we can see that there's our department dimension and there's our fund dimension. So when we run this report, when we wrote this report in the report writer, we told the report writer to use those dimensions, those fund restriction dimensions, as column headings. We could also tell them to put them as rows. So what we're showing you over here is in the financial report writer, the ability to slice and dice this information very easily and very quickly, and we can drill down to the source of these transactions from our dashboards. Again, in non-profit organizations, we might want to create multiple types of dashboards, in which case we can create an outcomes dashboard and put a foundation metrics on there. Now, this is very interesting. These are statistical postings. So these are non-financial units. So, where it's not a debit or a credit, it's a head count, or perhaps it's a number of patients that have visited, or the number of units served, or whatever it might be, the number of meals served, perhaps. What Sage Interact can do is we can set up a automatic counting rule. So perhaps as we're posting an invoice, it increases the statistical journal for the number of patients served. So in the background, a transaction is actually posting these statistical entries to either increase it or decrease it. So perhaps it's a credit note. Well, then it's going to decrease it. But if it's an invoice, it's going to increase it. And then we've got the full drill down capability, because as we're hovering over on our dashboard, it changes blue. And then on graphs, again, if we click on the graph, we've got the full drill down functionality again. So imagine a world now where you have a dashboard with KPIs, where you can actually drill down to the source transaction that created that KPI, so that you can interrogate it in case there's any anomalies with that figure. Coming back to a profit organization, so if you're probably moving inventory items, so tangible items, inventory control, sales order entry, purchase order entry has got you covered, because inside of here we can start buying tangible products, selling tangible products, warehousing tangible products with serials perhaps, or lot numbers, or expiry dates. Interact has got all of that functionality. So perhaps your procurement process starts off with a requisition. Once you've created that requisition, maybe a user or a bunch of users are alerted to the fact on email that there's a purchase transaction requiring their approval. And all the information that they need is sitting inside of that email, where they can click on the link. And this is the beauty of having a cloud native product, is from your mobile device's inbox, you can drill directly into Interact. So if you haven't logged in yet, it'll ask you for a username, password, but I've already logged in on this device, which is why it's taking me directly into the screen. And now we can approve or reject. We can actually drill into that transaction. And perhaps if it's a budget issue, we can drill into the budget to see if there's actually enough funds available. In this case, there is, for us to make that approve or decline decision. Now, once you've approved a requisition, we can set up the system to send an email back to the requester to let them know that their requisition has been approved. Once that requisition's been approved, we can very, very easily convert that requisition through to a purchase order, because we don't want to duplicate our efforts, right? If all the information we need is sitting inside the requisition, well, then we simply want to click on the convert button and convert it to a purchase order. And once it's in a purchase order state, we can also tell the system to send an email to our supplier and attach a PDF of that purchase order, so that they understand very easily, very quickly what it is that we're ordering from them. And then what we'll be doing is using our report, or our outbound report designers, to make the report look like you have them already. So putting your logos, your watermarks, or whatever they may be. So fully configurable. We can change the way those outbound documents look. And again, Once the purchase order has been created and sent out, we can convert it to an invoice. So we don't need to ever duplicate our efforts, ever again. And now once that invoice has been created, it's sitting inside of the accounts payable module. And perhaps we have an approval process on those invoices. So somebody needs to approve them first, in which case they would go ahead and prove it. It becomes available to pay. We can pay our invoice. And if we've got approvals on those payments, well, then the approvers will be notified that they've got payments that they need to be approved. And once those payments have been approved, they will be sitting in the cash book module waiting for you to generate the payment file. This is the electronic payment file, and pass that banking file or that payment file through to your banking software so that your banking software can execute that payment. In the sales order side, again, you might start off with a quotation, which can be converted to an order. The order can be converted to a delivery note, and the delivery note to an invoice. So you don't ever have to duplicate your efforts again. And once you've got that invoice in the system, it can be automatically emailed through to the customer. Also, statements will be emailed through to the customers at month end or whenever you run your statements. We can receive payments, in which case we're going to allocate the payment directly off against the invoice. Alternatively, we can use our cash management module and do a bank reconciliation where we're telling Sage Intacct to perform the bank reconciliation for us. Because what we've got is the ability to create an import. So we select the CSV file to import that. And once we've imported it, Sage Intacct will have matching rules and will be able to automatically match that reconciliation. That's one way of doing it. The other way of doing it is to subscribe to the Sage Banking Cloud, where as soon as transactions hit your online bank, they're automatically fed into Sage Intacct. And that means that we've got the posting rules defined, so that automatic link that's coming through from your bank into your Intacct bank is being automatically reconciled. So what you're listening to here, ladies and gentlemen, is a lot of automation that's coming through into your world now. And on the VAT management module, we've got our tax submissions, which means that Sage Intacct is also going to create the VAT 201 for you automatically. So once we've done our submission, you can see that there's a PDF copy of the VAT 201, and then there's also a CSV copy, so we can integrate it with SARS. Now, as we're posting our entries into the general ledger, typically they're coming from our subledgers, but perhaps we're importing a payroll journal. So regardless of whether we are creating the transactions that are hitting the general ledger from the system, or perhaps we're importing journal entries, Sage Intacct's got something called artificial intelligence, whereby we can find those journal anomalies. We can highlight them and we can say this is an outlier. And it's going to send that outlier to an approver and say, you need to just look at this outlier. It does not fit the history of your postings. So that approver will hover over the line and see the account is unusual. We'll see that the account with the department's unusual, and they'll use that information to approve or decline that anomaly. This is ensuring that our journal entries, our transactions that are hitting our financials are perfect. They've been validated, specifically where anomalies have been highlighted. And then at month end, when we need to do our consolidation, so for those of you who have got a multi-entity environment, you simply run the consolidation at month end. And once the consolidation has been run, you can use your dashboards, those dashboards that we had a look at a little bit earlier, to analyze those consolidations. So there's the consolidated balance sheet. There's the consolidated profit and loss. Now, what you'll see is that this profit and loss statement has actually got the subsidiaries of the, there's something not posting here. It's not displaying very well over here. That's fine. Let's switch through to our other company, and we're going to the consolidations there. Let's go to our dashboards.
Grant, I'm getting there's something that you mentioned, and I'm getting a question here in the background as you as you wrap up. Just cautious of time as well. And the issue was around sort of hybrid models, sort of not hybrid models, but people that are working in hybrid teams now, and some of the functionalities that you've spoken to here. How do they run in that type of environment? As you quickly wrap up, as we hit the top of the hour. Thanks, Grant.
Sure. When you say a hybrid, are we talking
sort of hybrid teams? You mix. You're working at home, also working in the office. How do you move within that environment? Does it matter at all?
No. Well, look, whether you're working in the office or whether you're working from home, you're accessing Intacct over the World Wide Web. So it really doesn't matter. Where you're working. The same way you're going to do your online banking, the same way you're going to connect to your online bank is the same way you're going to connect to Sage Intacct. So it's over the World Wide Web with a browser, whether you're at home or whether you're at the office.
Okay,
so that brings us to the end of our session, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for your time today. We've run out of time, so I'll hand back over to Brian. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Grant. Really insightful using this type of, cloud tech to sort of navigate the business. And as we, reach the top of the hour, I want to go to Chuma quickly just to give us some closing remarks. So I'll start with her, and then I'll go to Nobukhosi after that. Some closing remarks.
Thank you for that, Brian. I think crisp and shortly.
You can stop sharing your screen as well, Grant. Thanks.
Yes, we need to be rethinking the role of future finance leaders, and I think businesses need to be asking themselves whether they have the right skills and the right tools to be able to take on the next 5 years.
All right, thank you. Nobukhosi, what would you say?
I think what I'd say, Brian, is that as business leaders now and finance leaders as well, we really need to be more agile in the decisions that we're making, the features that we're bringing to our organizations, bringing data. So we need to really do the work to see how we can move faster, quicker, and be able to grow our businesses. Thank you.
Faster and quicker. You're done.
Brian, these are exciting times. I think what the technology does for us is it moves all of us up one level. Gone are the days where we need to do data entry and any mundane tasks. It's more about the storytelling, more about strategic thinking, more about data-driven insights. And that to me is a lot more exciting. So a lot of us can look forward to, I think, a bright finance future.
Awesome. And I was just going to go to Grant quickly. Some of your clients that are using Sage Intacct to sort of tell their story. What are some of the things they're positively saying?
Well, the fact that they can now work from anywhere over the World Wide Web is the biggest thing for them because it's pure mobile now, right? They don't need to be sitting at their tables at home or at the office running through remote desktop connections or virtual private networks to work. They simply need that internet connection with the web browser on any device now from anywhere in the world, and they can access their systems. And that's the biggest one that they're getting so far.
Awesome, awesome. And ladies and gentlemen, there you have it. Cloud tech, your secret to financial storytelling, and some of the things that we need to do as finance professionals to get ourselves up on the way. It doesn't matter whether you're a big business or you're a small entrepreneur, or you're just a finance person coming straight off the rack from the world of academia. There's a lot of things out there to look for, so reach out to people that can support you. I'd like to thank Nobukhosi Dlamini, a tech entrepreneur, for coming to the session. Chuma Mjali, academic from University of Fort Hare. Jordaan Burger from Sage, Middle East and Africa and Asia, as well as Grant Ball for showing us a fantastic demo of what it is to have cloud migration capabilities, tech capabilities. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much, and we wish you all a wonderful afternoon. Yes, you will have it recorded, Anastasia. It will be sent out to you. Thank you for that question just in time before I hit the end button. Have a wonderful afternoon. You will get a recorded copy. Thank you.